cosmonaut Alexei Leonov was the first person to ever complete a spacewalk. The trip outside the spacecraft was pretty much as planned, but when he tried to re-enter, things started to go pear-shaped. 40 years after the spaceflight, he told the full story in an extract of his book, Two Sides of the Moon, published in Air and Space magazine. When it was time to come back inside, Leonov realized his spacesuit had deformed with lack of atmospheric pressure, and he was going to have to go in head first rather than feet first, as had been planned. He was also going to have to slowly let all the oxygen out of his suit in order to actually fit into the airlock. It was uncomfortable. He said, "I could feel my temperature rising dangerously high, with the rush of heat from my feet traveling up my legs and arms." But he made it. But his troubles didn't end there. Just before Leonov and his crewmate Pavel Belyayev were due to start coming out of orbit and back to Earth, they realized their landing module's automatic guidance system wasn't working. They had to get back to Earth manually, and they had to choose where to land. Landing somewhere sparsely populated, but still within Soviet territory, they headed for an area west of the Ural Mountains. But as soon as Belyayev turned on the communication cable still connected to the landing module, where the two cosmonauts were, to the orbit module, and they were spinning around it as they threw them off course. Eventually, it burned through, and the landing module came free, but the mishap meant they were 2,000 kilometers away from their planned landing spot. They were also in 2 feet of snow, without any shelter except their landing capsule, and with only one pistol to protect themselves against the area's wildlife. Leonov recounted, "We were only too aware that the area where we had landed was the habitat of bears and wolves. It was spring, the mating season when both animals are at their most aggressive. We had only one pistol aboard our spacecraft, but we had plenty of ammunition. As the sky darkened, the trees started cracking with the drop in temperature. A sound I was so familiar with from my childhood, and the wind began to howl. They were, of course, rescued eventually, but not before spending 2 nights in the freezing temperatures of one of the deepest parts of Siberia." Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano was out on a routine spacewalk in July 2013, when it suddenly became very non-routine. Parmitano at first thought the liquid he saw inside his helmet was his own sweat. Doing anything in a spacesuit is a lot of effort, so that would have made sense, but after a while it became clear there was far too much of it. Another possible explanation was that it was coming from his drinking bag, but he wasn't convinced of that either. "I feel a lot of water on the back of my head, but I don't think it is from my bag," he told Mission Control. Later, he followed up his comment saying, "It was getting worse. The leak is not from the water bag, and it is increasing." 23 minutes after Parmitano first warned of water in his helmet, Mission Control made the decision to terminate the spacewalk, and he started to make his way back towards the airlock. Suddenly, things got worse. He later wrote in a blog post for the European Space Agency, "2 things happen. The sun sets, and my ability to see, already compromised by the water, completely vanishes, making my eyes useless, but worse than that, the water covers my nose, a really awful sensation that I make worse by my vain attempts to move the water by shaking my head. By now, the upper parts of the helmet is full of water, and I can't even be sure that the next time I breathe, I will fill my lungs with air and not liquid. To make matters worse, I realize that I can't even understand which direction I should head in to get back to the airlock. I can't see more than a few centimeters in front of me, not even enough to make out the handles we use to move around the station." Parmitano couldn't communicate with anyone, but did manage to make it back to the airlock. After a few tense minutes as the airlock repressurized, the door to the space station opened and his crewmates were waiting to help get him out of the helmet. NASA couldn't explain the malfunction immediately, but published a report in February 2014 saying that a blockage had caused the water leak and that the problem had been misdiagnosed when the same suit had leaked on an earlier spacewalk.